Hey guys, tonight we drift across the still waters of Lake Xochimilco. The air is soft with mist, and just beneath the surface, something ancient stirs. A night breeze carries the earthy scent of wet reeds, crushed lilies, and distant woods. You're balanced in a canoe that rocks gently under your knees, its sides slick with dew. Around you, the darkness parts to reveal a dreamscape, pictures of land that float like strange, silent rafts, sprouting maize, squash, beans, and flowers in neat little rows. But these aren't islands. Not really. There's something more peculiar, more stubbornly human. You're floating through a farming system engineered centuries ago by people who didn't just adapt to their swampy Welcome to the chinampas. And yet, for centuries, they fed an empire. You probably won't survive this if you show up with modern farming assumptions. These gardens laugh at they spit in the general direction of tractors. Either way, they became the cornerstone of an agricultural system that somehow supported one of the densest urban populations in the world right here, in a swamp. A ballet of mud-smeared legs, baskets swinging on backs, farmers shouting across the water, layer in lake mud, dead plants, and even trash. Anchor it with trees, then plant, harvest, repeat. Simple, in the same way that baking a croissant is simple. But now, it's quiet. Just you, the lake, and the faint smell of decaying vegetation. Don't worry, it's normal. You see, farming didn't stop when the sun went down. The texture is soft and slightly damp. Below, through the water's glassy surface, you see the long shadows of roots stretching downward. These chinampas weren't truly floating like rafts. They were anchored, staked into the lake bed with poles made from ahwat trees, a kind of fast-growing willow. These trees didn't just hold the gardens in place. They offered shade, filtered water, and their roots acted like living nets. The Aztecs were guided by calendars as complex as star charts. These weren't just decorative. Flowers were currency, tribute, and spiritual offerings. The Aztecs loved their flowers. Honestly, they were kind of obsessed. You might say they were the original cottagecore civilization, but with more obsidian. The city is built partly on land, partly on water, and entirely on ambition. Without chinampas, none of it works. No food, no trade, no tribute system. These floating gardens weren't just practical, they were political. A demonstration of control over nature. A quiet reminder. The empire grows where the emperor wills it to grow. Each garden is part of a living system, a patchwork of floating platforms that absorb, recycle, and reinvent everything they touch. The Aztecs had their own methods of pest control: fish that ate mosquito larvae, ducks that patrolled the gardens, and occasionally ceremonial smoke wafting over the water. Certain crops had to be planted by the moon's position. Offerings had to be buried in freshly tilled soil before sunrise. If you listen closely, you might hear a soft chant from across the lake, someone whispering to the corn spirits, maybe, or apologizing to the earth. And drop a comment with your location and local time. My love seeing where and when you all tuning in from. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. The lake shimmers around you, its surface hiding a complicated web of canals, rafts, and anchored soil. But that's a culinary discussion for another sleepless night. Your boat slides quietly between chinampas, those curious man-made islands that seem to hover just above the water. Dragonflies zip by, their wings catching moonlight. His boat's full of harvested chilies, their skins still gleaming with dew. It's said the best chilies came from Chinampa near Lake Xochimilco, where the lake water was particularly rich in nutrients, in part to the clever placement of nearby canals and sediment traps. Occasionally, a frog croaks a lazy, swampy sound, content to announce its presence and nothing more. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The land is borrowed, fabricated, pulled into existence by hand. You're floating through the Valley of Mexico, sometime around the 1300s. These waters have always been here, but the Mexique, the group we now call the Aztecs, took this method and turned it into an empire-feeding masterpiece. Earlier cultures like the Xochimilcas had already experimented with building out into the lake, and right now you're drifting through the very heart of it. Add a framework of reeds, logs, and brush. The Aztecs didn't invent chinampas outright. Historians still argue whether these floating gardens were originally devised for survival or as an intentional act of political genius. At night, it's almost peaceful. During the day, chaos. The system is deceptively simple. Start with shallow water, and it starts here on nights like this. You pass a farmer asleep in his canoe, his wide straw hat tipped over his face. Dogs here were companions and guardians also. Sometimes, dinner, you inhale the scent of night flowers, marigolds, perhaps growing along the chinampa's edge. And that's the magic of it. The land isn't just floating, it's breathing. Somewhere nearby, a dog barks. Not at you, probably at a heron, or maybe at nothing. You reach out and run your fingers along a patch of reeds tied with hemp twine. The air is cooler now. A mosquito buzzes near your ear. It's rude. You swat gently, trying not to splash yourself into the drink. From your little boat, you can see the outline of in the distance its lights, flickering like a reflection of the stars themselves. And right now, it's growing under your feet. You shift slightly in your boat, and the water slaps gently against its sides, a sleepy sound, rhythmic and soft, like the heartbeat of the lake itself. You're still drifting through this watery puzzle, but now your eyes catch something peculiar ahead. It's not a natural island, and it's certainly not a floating leaf pile. It's a work in progress, and you're about to see how these strange floating farms are made mud, sweat, and stubborn optimism. You glide closer and see figures bent over in the dusk, their silhouettes moving in slow, practiced motions. They're laying down brush layers of reeds, sticks, and water plants like tules and bulrushes. These are the foundations, you realize. The mattress before the soil. These stakes are planted in tidy rows, crisscrossed like you half expect someone to break out into a soft lullaby or chant, but no one speaks. This part of the work demands focus. You get the sense it's a kind of ritual, almost sacred in its repetition. They'll eventually sprout and grow into trees, further anchoring the chinampa and creating shady edges to keep it from drying out. The Aztecs didn't just pile dirt onto water and hope for the best. They built beds, literary beds for their crops, woven from lake reeds and anchored with care. The narrow shape made it easier to reach crops from either side, and those walkways, they doubled as dikes and irrigation channels. It smells about as good as you'd expect. He dumps it onto a pile with a satisfied grunt. These gardens were also ecosystems, home to birds, insects, and aquatic life. But sometimes they weren't. Sometimes they were considered part of the land's balance. And for people born to the lake, sinking is a temporary condition. You get the impression that every farmer here knew which fish to harvest and which to leave as guardians of the roots. Frogs nested in the reeds. Ducks cruised the canals. Even fish thrived beneath the chinampas, feeding on the overflow of nutrients. That their shapes, alignments, even planting cycles were guided by astrology or numerology. No one can quite prove it, but it's fun to imagine a priest farmer squinting at the stars, deciding it's finally time to plant some radishes. They're alive. Probably, you'll watch as someone carves a small groove into the fresh earth, a symbolic line. Perhaps, or maybe just marking where tomorrow's beans will go. This is where the magic starts, where the food begins. Somewhere, a flute plays a few wandering notes over the water. Not a concert, not a ritual, just someone playing in the dark. Corn, beans, squash, chilies, tomatoes, amaranth, and even medicinal herbs. The variety was staggering. One small plot could feed multiple families and keep them fed all year round. Compost was a key ingredient in chinampa farming, not an afterthought. The Aztecs recycled everything from spoiled tortillas to fish guts to human waste. In fact, the entire region was a grid and aquatic checkerboard of food, flowers, and freshwater access. If city planners today took notes from chinampa farmers, traffic might finally make sense. The reeds, local, even the twine binding everything together is made from lake plants or maguey fibers. Nothing's wasted, nothing imported. It's the kind of sustainability that would make your neighborhood organic coat blush. You pause and imagine trying this yourself. Geometrically perfect, in many cases long, narrow plots with raised walkways in between. The average chinampa measured about 30 by 2.5 meters, though some were longer, extending like green fingers into the lake. Balancing on a raft, wielding an obsidian-bladed hoe, all while hoping you don't sink. The bottom is a squishy stew of silt and decaying vegetation, and it smells, well, that's the polite word. It was and with each layer aided moodweeds, compost, reeds. You're witnessing one of the world's earliest examples of razor bed hydroponic farming. Only this system doesn't need electricity or plastic tubes, just hands, mud, and time. You watch as a farmer uses a basket to scoop up this nutrient-rich mud, mixing it with compost and even lakebed algae before slathering it onto the chinampa's growing frame. Think of it as artisanal mud pie. But for plants, you probably won't survive this. Honestly not, without slipping face first into the muck at least twice before lunch. Some call them anchored islands. Others insist they were rafts weighted down with clever ballast systems. The Aztec capital had a population rivaling 15th century Paris, and it was then nestled in a forest or by a riverbank. It was smack in the middle of a lake. Without chinampas, the city would have starved faster than you could say bad urban planning. Either way, what matters is that they stayed in place and they fed a city of over 200,000 people. The lake is shallow here, only a few feet deep, but deceptively soft. Historians still argue whether these gardens counted as floating in the strictest sense.
That's right.
You watch as a younger worker drives tall wooden stakes, often willow or alder, through the reed base and deep into the lakebed. It's a satisfying process to watch, slow, methodical, and oddly meditative. The materials are all local. The mud is local. And then there's the shape. These chinampas aren't round or lumpy like natural islands. They're rectangular. This wasn't just aesthetic. A man wades past, you carrying an enormous basket of rotting vegetation. Don't worry, that's not what's floating near your boat. This fertility, this richness, wasn't just natural. You glance up at a passing heron, its wings wide, gliding silently overhead. And yes, those fish were occasionally scooped up and eaten. You hear a soft splash. Someone dropped a tool, or maybe fell in. No one panics. It's just water. A nearby chinampa team laughs quietly as they tamp down the soil with their feet, flattening it into planting rows. There's a fringe theory debated endlessly that chinampas may have been a form of sacred geometry. The night deepens, and the chinampa you've been watching is nearly done. A brand new island, alive with potential. You close your eyes for a moment, listening to the lake. And in this moment, with your boat gently rocking and the smell of damp earth in your lungs, you finally understand. These gardens aren't just clever. The next morning, you're jolted awake by the sound of poles splashing into the lake again and again, in a steady rhythm. You blink, stretch, and find yourself still seated in your canoe, tied to the edge of a half-finished chinampa. Around you, the scene has changed from moonlit stillness to golden brown daylight. Everything smells like wet bark, sun-warmed silt, and the unmistakable funk of honest, old-fashioned labor. You rub your eyes and realize what you're seeing. Men and women hammering long, straight wooden poles into the water, each one carefully spaced and hammered deep into the lakebed. These aren't just supports. They're the skeleton of the island itself. What's clear is that the Aztecs mastered it. They built thousands of chinampas this way, creating a grid of anchored farmland so dense it could support a city larger than most European capitals of its time. If the chinampa were a ship, these stakes would be its anchor and hull combined. You float beside her for a moment, watching as she selects a straight, thin ahwat shoot and places it into the water like a candle into a cake. Too tight, and water can't flow. It's a lesson in balance, one that doesn't always go as planned. Except this cake is soggy, alive, and smells faintly of fish. One of the men, barefoot wiry and alarmingly efficient, drives another pole down with a fluid, almost lazy motion. It's mesmerizing, like a quiet war dance between man and wood and water. Like that time the whole island floated away during the festival. Apparently, the stakes didn't take root fast enough, and a fully planted chinampa decided it was tired of farming and went on vacation across the lake. Between them, the soil and compost are packed carefully, and young seedlings are already beginning to push their way upward. The frame is done, the stakes driven deep, the reeds woven tight. A group of children race along one of the narrow earthen walkways between chinampas, their shouts echoing over the water. One of them slips, splashes, emerges grinning. Another swings a pole like a sword, every stake set with intent. This wasn't just farming, it was architecture. Agriculture as infrastructure. A floating city of effort and memory, suspended between lake and sky. You're not sure whether this is recess or a serious territorial dispute, but either way, It's delightfully chaotic. It doesn't look like much, just a long, narrow patch of dirt, but you know better now. This is a floating promise, a future meal, a quiet act of rebellion against hunger and hardship. Tiny maize stalks, green as jade, tremble in the breeze. The earth here is damp but firm underfoot. You hop out of your canoe carefully and feel it, spongy but solid. That by planting according to stellar alignment, the Aztecs believed they could bring balance to both land and cosmos. No one's confirmed it, but it makes you look up. The sky is a deep, perfect blue. Maybe Orion's belt is hiding in the pattern of bean rows below. Their shadows stretch long across the water, and your boat creaks gently as you climb in, like walking on a mattress made of ambition. These poles, often made from ahwot trees, are selected not only for their flexibility, but because they sprout. He whispers something you don't catch, maybe a prayer, maybe a joke, hard to tell with elders. Yes, sprout. These stakes don't just sit there, they grow roots, leaves, and in time, become trees themselves. Today's job is critical. No stakes, no garden, no garden, no food, no food. Well, you get it. You ease your way toward the workers, the canoe gliding between lily pads. You help with the final step, weaving mats of reeds between the stakes. In a world without fences or deeds, the placement of poles marks territory, lineage, and responsibility. You find that oddly comforting. Here, the land remembers who cares for it. This gives the plot stability, kind of like a lattice beneath a garden bed. The mats soak up water, hold soil, and prevent the plot from dissolving in the rain. And, bonus, they smell faintly of mint. So the chinampa isn't anchored by dead wood, it's fastened by living trees. That's either absurdly poetic or terrifyingly clever, possibly both. The thud travels up through the water into your canoe. It's like a heartbeat, slow, heavy, constant. Historians still argue whether this method of anchoring was unique to the Aztecs or inherited from earlier Mesoamerican cultures. You get a little closer, close enough to feel the vibrations as each pole hits lakebed rock. Thud, thud. One of the women, her hands calloused and stained with mud, gestures toward a bundle of young saplings waiting to be planted. It's meticulous work. Each stake has to be spaced just right to keep the chinampa from drifting or breaking apart. To loose, and your crops float away. You overhear a young boy mutter something that makes two elders burst out laughing. You catch only the tail end. It happens. You paddle onward, noticing now how the stakes form neat rows, like ribs. You're walking on water. Kind of. One farmer offers you a strip of bark to tie your hair back apparently. The next part gets messy, but there's more to it than construction. These stakes are more than wood and structure their boundaries. You step back to look at the chinampa now. The sun is high, and the air hums with insects. There's a fringe, theory mostly ignored, that the layout of chinampa plots mirrored constellations. You feel the weight of history pressing gently against you. Every pole in this place was driven by hand. Nearby, an old man dips his hand into the water, eyes closed. You walk back to your canoe, the stakes now like sentinels rising from the lake. The thudding has stopped for now. The new chinampa stands still, silent, rooted, almost. You float gently now, your canoe gliding between two finished chinampas, narrow green islands lined with blooming marigolds and shy squash blossoms. You squint against the mid-morning light as you move closer to another team at work, this time doing something a little messier, a little less glamorous. No hammering stakes or shaping reed mats today. This crew is up to their elbows in sludge. Yes, mud, weeds, rot today. You witness the artistry of muck. You pull up alongside them and the smell hits you like a damp pillow full of compost. You're not sure what's in it: lake mud, duck droppings, maybe a touch of last month's festival leftovers, but it's being mixed and mounded with loving care. Welcome to the chinampa layering process, a humble art form performed with bare hands and a deep respect for the squishy stuff of life. The Aztecs, of course, would say they perfected it. It's engineered for water retention, for drainage, even for route guidance. Not for fun, but to collect materials for the next chinampa. You're handed one. It's warm, soft, and fragrant. You take a bite, the sweet spicy filling cutting through the earthy scent of the lake. You're not sure if this is lunch or a reward for surviving your first chinampa mud layering, but you accept it with grace and a quiet thank you. Rotting roots and dead lily pads are treasures here. Nothing is wasted. The ecosystem is self. Each basketful will be layered again, this time with more compost, a sprinkle of ashes, maybe even crushed snail shells for extra minerals. The slow march from canoe to plot. The calls of distant herons, answering each other like old friends. You could get used to this. A goose honks as it floats past your boat like it owns the play switch. In a way, it kind of does. Someone scrawls a lazy spiral pattern into the top layer with a stick, half planning, half doodle. The spiral will guide where corn and beans go. The chinampa is finished. Not just built, but alive, planted, anchored, layered like a cake with 10,000 ingredients, none of which belong in a cookbook. And watching it now, you might agree, the result is absurdly fertile. Crops grow here as if the lake itself insists upon it. A few catfish circle your toes, curious or hopeful. You lean back on your elbows and sigh. This patch of lake, once empty and useless, is now a thriving microcosm. You realize something then. There's not a single thing involved in this process that couldn't be found within a few kilometers. The system is entirely local, renewable, recyclable, possibly edible, though you wouldn't recommend the mud layer. Don't worry, he seems to say without speaking. You pressed your fingers into the still warm top layer, making tiny wells in the earth. The Aztecs couldn't have known the science, but they knew the results. Their crops were healthy, their soil constantly renewed. You can almost hear your houseplants back home weeping with envy. A pouch of maize kernels is passed around, each one a small, golden promise. You place a few into the soil, cover them gently, and press the earth flat. Corn, beans, squash, they'll all grow here, their roots weaving into the mud like invisible threads holding the whole thing together. If you sink, we'll name the chinampa after you. Two women squat near the center of the plot, alternating handfuls of soft lakebed muck with piles of chopped water lilies, dried reeds, and fibrous weeds. They're not just making soil, they're building a living sponge. Every layer breathes, absorbs, and stores nutrients. It's kind of like making lasagna, except everything smells like pond, and the end result is delicious only to corn. You're invited wordlessly to help. You step out of the canoe, and the surface squishes under your weight. A nearby farmer grins at your hesitation. You drop to your knees and grab a fistful of dark, cool mud. It oozes between your fingers, heavy with silt and ancient life. Your hands join the rhythm of reeds, weeds, repeat. Every few scoops, someone tosses in a basketful of organic trash. Banana peels, broken maize, husks, bits of fish bone, it all goes in. Everything becomes soil. Historians still argue whether this process, this almost ritualistic layering, was inherited from even older Toltec or Xochimilco practices. You notice how carefully the layers are placed, thicker in the middle, thinner at the edges. The plot isn't just a random dirt pile. In the canals nearby, boys fish for floating debris. The farmers break for a quick meal. Tamales wrapped in maize husks, sweetened with honey and chili. One of the women pulls a thin strip of obsidian from her belt and starts trimming weeds with its sharp, precise movements. No metal here, just volcanic glass. You're told again, without words, to help plant. There's a fringe belief, mostly among modern that chinampa soil had natural antibacterial properties due to the microbial composition of the lakebed. You help carry baskets of weeds to the next plot, your arms coated in a fine layer of slime and pride. It's exhausting, filthy work, but it's also calming. You've entered a rhythm now, the weight of the mud in your hands. One of the elders catches your eye and raises a brow. Your hands remember the lake, he says simply. You're not sure whether that's a compliment or a warning. As the sun begins to lower, casting everything in a warm amber glow, you look around and take stock of what's been done. You sit on the edge of the canal, dangling your feet in the water. This is farming with a pulse. You're not cultivating land, you're feeding a lake, and in return, it feeds you. You're walking now, barefoot along a damp, narrow path. It runs between two chinampas, like a root between roots, just wide enough for two baskets and a stubborn donkey though. You haven't seen many donkeys. Mostly people walk, always walking, always carrying. On your left, a cornfield rustles softly. You touch the soil, it's soft, springy, slightly warm from the sun. The moisture is perfect, not too wet, never too dry. these floating fields breathe? Or did they simply observe that gardens near willow trees grew better and give the trees a place in their stories and rituals? Either way, the roots are the reason these plots last decades, sometimes centuries. This one's planted in three sisters: corn, beans, and squash. The corn shoots skyward, tall and thin. The beans wrap themselves around the corn stalks, using them like a natural trellis. She tells you casually, like it's no big deal, that the beans will feed the corn. You blink. How? And the squash spreads outward, shading the soil and keeping it cool, like co-workers who actually get along. And underneath, hidden from view, is the symphony of roots. The roots weren't just structural. There were connections, channels, stories, growing underground, chemical signals, tiny vibrations, maybe even electrical impulses. And while science hasn't confirmed a full-on root internet, the evidence keeps growing. Over time, the roots of neighboring plants will find each other, intertwine, compete, maybe, but often cooperate. It's like a quiet root-level village council meeting happening beneath your feet. Bees buzz lazily between squash flowers. A hummingbird darts past your ear, as if offended by your lack of speed. Somewhere across the canal, a child sings a fragment of a lullaby, something about rain and frogs and the gods getting sleepy. He points to the carrot tops and says something about the roots tasting the lake. You're not sure whether that's a compliment or a red flag, but the carrots look delicious either way. The stalks are tall and green, their leaves twitching in the breeze like sleepy flags. They entwine with each other, gripping through the reeds, probing through the muck. The roots of ahuot trees, remember those from earlier, run along the chinampa's edges like guardrails. They stabilize the whole thing and prevent erosion. It's easy to forget, in a world of skyscrapers and self-checkout lines, that the world was once fed by systems this quiet, this organic, this deeply rooted. Others are tidy, disciplined, almost militaristic in their neat rows and carefully trimmed borders. You wonder if the root systems reflect their above-ground appearance. The farmer explains that it's an old practice meant to guide the roots, not magic, exactly, more like intention. Roots grow where energy is focused, or so they say. Are messy gardens full of rebellious roots? Do the neat plots of polite, rule-abiding underground communities? Some call them superstition. Others say the crops grow better when the rituals are observed. Who are you to argue? After all, you're just the visitor, wandering around barefoot, covered in root dust and humble admiration. Some even say they help talk to the plants, carrying nutrients and moisture the way nerves carry signals. On your right, squash vines stretch across the soil like lazy serpents, their fat yellow blossoms basking in the sun. The roots of amaranth are shallow, but quick-growing. They drink greedily from the upper layers of soil, and they respond to subtle changes in light and water. They were a staple here: food, medicine, even ritual ingredient. You pause and crouch, peering under a cluster of leaves. The dense, mat-like resistance of thousands of interlocking roots. It's like a living carpet. No wonder the chinampas don't fall apart. There it is, a baby calabaza, barely bigger than your hand, growing slowly and stubbornly in the spongy chinampa soil. And below it, barely visible, a dense, tangled web of roots. This is where it all happens. The chinampas don't just hold plants. They hug them, support them, feed them from every direction. Each crop sends its roots downward into the dense, layered soil. But they don't stop there. Historians still argue whether these effects were understood biologically or spiritually. Did the Aztecs know the science of root systems? You dig a little deeper into the soil with your fingers, careful not to disturb anything too seriously, and you feel it. You walk farther down the path and reach a plot where crops are just beginning to sprout. It's genius. It's ancient, and it's so efficient that farmers in parts of the Americas still use it today. One farmer stands nearby, adjusting a cane trellis, humming softly. Nitrogen fixin', she says with a shrug. The beans pull nitrogen from the air and push it into the soil. The corn slurps it up. They share, like friends. You nod slowly, pretending you already knew that. The woman laughs, and here's where it gets even stranger. Many of these root systems don't just grow down, they grow sideways. The Aztecs believed plants had spirits, not just as metaphor, but as real, living presences. There's a fringe belief among modern botanists that plants talk through their root systems. So when you walk between these rows, you might be treading on a vast, leafy conspiracy of communication, a plant parliament, if you will. You sit down at the end of a plot and run your hand through a patch of amaranth, soft feathery. The sun is warmer now, and the chinampas begin to hum with life. And still, beneath it all, the roots stretch and tangle and grow. A man passes you, carrying a bundle of freshly pulled carrots. You recognize the sympathy, sweet, slightly herbal. You notice that each chinampa seems to have its own personality. Some plots are lush, and chaotic vines spilling over the edges like green waterfalls. Historians rarely ask these questions, but maybe they should. At one chinampa you see a curious sign. Small stones arranged in a spiral at one corner of the plot. There's a debate among local chinamperos today about whether these traditions still matter. The day stretches on, and the shadows lengthen. You lie back on a patch of fallow soil, staring up at the sky. The chinampa sighs beneath you. A gentle creak, a shift. Maybe it's settling. Maybe it's just saying hello. You drift now not just across water, but through a memory. The chinampas have a way of bending time. 1 minute you're crouched beside a squash blossom, and the next you're gliding down a canal flanked by symmetrical green islands, everything mirroring itself. Sky and water, vines and clouds, boats and birds. He nods at you without a word and keeps rowing, the wooden paddle slicing into the lake with smooth, practiced strokes. Ahead lies one of the marvels of this system, not just the gardens themselves, but the canals that connect them. The canoe beneath you rocks gently, propelled by a quieter in the hands of a local ferryman. You lean over the edge and peer into the water. There's even a floating platform in the center, moored with thick vines and tree trunks. You imagine it as a sort of aquatic roundabout, where farmers pause to trade greetings, pass goods, or settle a territorial dispute with a well-aimed squash. It's not exactly crystal clear, but it's alive. Little fish dart among the reeds. Water insects skip across the surface like caffeinated pebbles. He gives you a nod, brief, polite, and then he's gone, slipping around a bend that curves like a ribbon through the fields. Either way, what's left behind is startling in its precision. It's slow, heavy work. They're pulling up muck, dark, thick, and full of organic material. That layers of sediment carefully tracked and replaced told a story about the health of the land, the weather of the year, even the spread of disease. The Aztecs didn't write it down, they just read the water. You realize what they're doing, collecting sediment for compost. It's a perfect loop. The chinampa drops nutrients into the canal, and the canal returns them later. This isn't just farming, it's farming with a memory, the kind of order that only comes from a deep lived-in understanding of nature's chaos. It all begins here. These canals are the veins that feed the heart of an empire, the sound of paddles, the calls of birds, the quiet creak of wood. It's also unhurried, intentional, like the canals themselves know they've got nothing to prove. You step back in, and it guides you onward, through the winding, watery corridors of an ancient system, still very much alive. One leaps into the water with a shriek of laughter, and the others follow. But it didn't need stone arches or marble inscriptions, just water, time, and people who listened to the land. The canal isn't just infrastructure, it's part of life. Part playground, part pantry. And beneath it all, invisible but ever present, is a network of knowledge, centuries-old water routes, built not for beauty, but for brilliance. You climb out and step onto the path. From here, you can see it clearly, the pattern, the design. It's like an enormous chessboard of green and blue, narrow fields hemmed in by sleek canals, all crisscrossed like a woven mat. It's loaded with baskets of produce, maize, beans, chilies, gourds, herbs, and it's moored at the edge of a chinampa like a mobile grocery store. A woman rows up beside it and begins bartering, to fish for a pumpkin, a handful of amaranth for a fistful of prickly pears. You can't hear the exact words, but the hand gestures are lively, the smile's easy. She's barefoot, steady, unbothered by the uneven terrain. She pauses only to give you a puzzled look. What's this mud-covered outsider doing gawking at canals? You smile sheepishly, and she moves on. The canal network is the silent engine behind it all. You notice the walls load dikes built from packed mud, stones, and logs. These canals create a self-regulating system that hydrates crops, supports fish, transports tools, and moves people without a drop of wasted energy. You don't walk to the market here. You paddle. These form the boundaries of each plot and help keep the water where it needs to be. Too much rain, the dikes hold. Too little, the canals feed moisture into the surrounding soil. Historians still argue whether these waterways were built all at once, master-planned by the Aztecs in an inspired moment of hydraulic genius, or if they evolved over centuries, adjusted, extended, and repurposed as chinampa agriculture expanded. You pass a crossroads, yes, a canal intersection where two wide lanes meet in a perfect right angle. The ferryman taps the side of the canoe and points toward the edges. It's not flashy engineering, but it's devastatingly effective. A man rows past you now, his boat full of marigolds and chilies, their colors so bright they seem to burn against the green water. Up ahead, a group of children are playing on the bank. You reach another bend and see a team of workers dredging the bottom of the canal. There's a fringe theory among archaeologists that the canals acted like time capsules. The ferryman stops the canoe beside a small wooden dock. It looks like chaos up close, but from this vantage point, it's organized, almost geometric. You pass a young girl with a bucket of water balanced on her head. Further down the path, you spot something you didn't expect. A floating market barge. You imagine the great city just a short paddle away, with its market at Tlatelolco, an enormous trading hub filled with goods from every corner of the empire. You sit on a low wall and let the scene wash over you. There is a scholar who once said the Chinampa canal system rivaled Roman aqueducts in its scale and utility. The ferryman waves from the canoe, ready to take you farther. As the boat drifts forward, you'd look down and notice the water's reflection again, this time, your own face hovering beside clouds and cornstalks. For a second, you forget where the land ends and the water begins. Your canoe glides onward, hugging the edge of a chinampa, shaded by low branches and drooping vines. You breathe in a scent that's faintly herbal, with notes of smoke and crushed greenery. You can hear the rhythm of a wooden rattle somewhere up ahead, and just beyond the next bend, you find the source. A small group gathered around a fire pit near the edge of a wide planting bed. They are placing bundles of herbs, copal, sage, even dried chilies into the fire. The smoke rises in lazy spirals. One woman carries a pot of water and sprinkles it over the chinampa's surface. Speaking in Nahuatl, her words gentle and rhythmic, you catch phrases that sound like thanks, like welcome, like requests for abundance. Today, you've stumbled into a chinampa ritual, not the blood-soaked spectacles you've heard about, but something quieter, older, and far more grounded. This one's about soil, not sacrifice. The people are dressed in simple cotton tunics, and their faces are streaked with ash-not war paint, but earth-blessing marks. This is not showy religion. This is land-keeping as prayer. They keep the chinampas from slipping away. Not physically, though. Remember that story about the drifting garden, but spiritually, emotionally, they pause after every third seed, murmuring something into the soil. It's not performative. No one's watching. It's just what you do. You press your fingers into the earth and tuck in a handful of beans, covering them gently. No words needed. Your action is enough. If you don't thank the land, they say, the land forgets you. A young man splashing water over the base of a tree before pruning it. An older woman setting a stone upright at the corner of her plot, nothing fancy, just upright. He hums tunelessly, dragging his bare feet across the damp earth. You follow him with your eyes as he climbs into a canoe and pushes off into the canal, probably headed to another chinampa, another small ceremony, another cup of atole waiting near a fire. The water laps gently, as if waiting for you. You drift backward for a moment, watching the smoke rise in wisps above the garden. A marker, a silent boundary. You wonder if she's acknowledging something or someone. Break it, and you risked more than bad weather. The chinampa seems to sit a little straighter in the water, like it's just taken a deep breath. You watch quietly from your canoe, trying not to creak the wood too loudly. It tastes like cooked maize and comfort. You sip slowly. Around you, the ceremony winds down. The smoke fades. The fire burns low. A quiet gasp passes through the group, not because it's dramatic, but because it's deliberate. Not because you fully understand, but because you want to. Symbolic. Those seeds will never grow, but their smoke will carry something upward. Intention, maybe. No royal edicts, no calendar stones, just the quiet, repeated acts of people who understand that soil remembers kindness. The land breathes, you know, she says, as if you'd asked. You feed it, it feeds you. Others believe every step from staking out the island to harvesting maize had a ritual component. They point to the Aztec worldview, in which every element had a deity, every action a cosmic ripple. But here, On this floating garden, the act of feeding yourself is folded into the spiritual fabric of life. Each leaf matters, each drop of water, each breath of soil. One child notices you, then returns to watching the fire. You are not a threat, just another thing the lake has coughed up. Historians still argue how spiritual chinampa work really was. Some say these rituals were rare, tied only to harvest or planting. To plant a seed was to enter into a contract with the gods. You think about your own routines, buying pre-washed spinach, checking expiration dates. Not exactly sacred. The woman leading the ceremony plucks a sprig of ipasort and tucks it behind her ear. She scatters a few seeds into the fire. There is a fringe belief one whispered among older Chinese emperors that these rituals didn't just help the land grow. You watch as another group moves through the plot, planting maize and even rows. You begin to notice these gestures everywhere now. You help for a while, if only to feel useful. Someone offers you a drink, a clay cup of atoll warm, thick, spiced with cinnamon and maybe something floral. And yet, nothing about this feels over. The ritual never really stops. It just flows into the work. A boy walks past, carrying a bundle of sage tied with reeds. This isn't the kind of history you find in textbooks. One elder looks at you as the group begins packing up. You nod. You'll help gather the baskets, wipe your hands on a scrap of maguey cloth, and return to your canoe. Was it a religious rite? A planting ritual? A practical team-building exercise with extra smoke? Hard to say, but something in the air feels cleaner now, calmer. As you float away, you reach down and trail your fingers in the water. It's cool, smooth, oddly familiar. You begin to wonder, if you spoke to the lake, would it answer? You've spent enough time among the chinampas now to begin recognizing patterns, not just in the layout of the gardens or the timing of the rituals, but in the people. Everyone seems to know exactly what to do when to plant, when to dredge, when to let the reeds grow wild, and when to cut them back. It's not written down anywhere, it's just known. Today, you decide to shadow one of the quietest figures you've ever seen, an old man with a slow gait and a faster mind. He doesn't talk much, but people move aside when he walks past. This plot is different. Where others are orderly, this one is wild, overgrown in places. Vines wrap around stakes that haven't been moved in years, but every leaf seems intentional. Every branch, somehow, in its proper place. He carries a long wooden pole with notches carved all along its length, not decoration, but memory. Each notch marks a season, a flood, a great harvest, or a near disaster. Not by signs or dreams, but through tiny signs. The way soil compacts beneath a squash vine, or how dragonflies move just before a rain. His name is something you can't quite pronounce, so you just call him the gardener, though you suspect that's like calling a cathedral a nice little church. He invites you wordlessly into his chinampa. You follow, stepping carefully along the packed earthen walk. Their roots are massive now, curled like river monsters around the chinampa's edge. You watch as the gardener places a stone at the base of one. It's not for what, it's a marker. This, apparently, is a problem tree. This one is older, covered in tarps and leaf mulch. The smell is, frankly, intense. But under the cover, the soil is black and soft and warm perfect. You ask if it's ready. He shakes his head. One more moon. It's heavier than you expected, carved from dense wood, polished by decades of use. It sinks about 6 inches and then hits something firm. The gardener hums quietly. That's the right depth. The natches catch your fingers, each one telling a story you can't yet hear. He nods once, as if to say, yes, it's your turn. It's not just a garden, it's a story, one told in leaves and stones, in plants allowed to go wild, and rows left to rest. You begin to understand that farming here isn't about control, it's about relationship. It's growing too fast, crowding the beans. No chopping though, just a stone. A conversation starter for later. You didn't just visit a chinampa. You were invited to read it. It's bitter, medicinal. It clears your nose, straightens your spine. You're awake again. But when you watch this man move, you don't see nostalgia. You see memory encoded in muscle. He doesn't use fancy tools, just his hands, a gourd ladle, and that same old pole. He taps it once on the soil after each watering, like a punctuation mark. The gardener begins his inspection, and you tag along like a curious duckling. He kneels beside a row of beans and pulls back the leaves. You lean in, expecting to see bugs or rot, but instead he points to a faint discoloration on the stem barely visible, like the difference between two shades of green. He mutters something that probably translates to, "Too much shadow last week." You nod, as if that means anything to you. The canal water reflects the light like a sheet of slow-moving glass. You pause and look back at the He sniffs it, listens to the leaves, then tosses it to the side. Not a sound from him, but his eyes say, "This one's off." You catch a glimpse of tiny white threads on the root tip, tired, disappointed in its own life choices. This chinampa is more than just a floating, fielded calendar, a weather record, a whispering archive of subtle changes. Historians still argue whether individual farmers really had such mastery of microclimates, or if this is a modern romanticization. He moves to a patch of amaranth and pulls a single stalk, tapping its root gently. You don't know, but he does. There is a fringe belief among older chinamperos that some of them, only a few, can read the land like a book. You wonder if the gardener is one of these people. He certainly doesn't move like he's guessing. You reach the back edge of the plot, where the ahau wood trees form a living fence. "Tomorrow," he finally mutters. It's the first word you've heard him say. You take a break near the compost mound, which means, not yet. You help him carry buckets from the canal, scooping water and pouring it gently between rows. He stops suddenly and holds the pole out to you. You take it with both hands. You press the pole into the soil next to a young maize stalk. Apparently, you pass the test. He walks ahead, and you follow. The sun is starting to lean toward the west, casting long shadows across the fields. From this angle, you can see what is built. You thank the gardener with a shallow bow. He doesn't respond directly, just hands you a leaf of ipasot to chew. As he turns back to his plot, you slip into your canoe, the pole still in your hands. For a moment, you sit perfectly still on the water, listening to the rustle of beans, the whisper of corn, the slow, steady breath of the earth. The day is slipping into gold now. You paddle lazily down the canal, the pole from the old gardener still resting across your lap. You're not quite sure what to do with it. Frame it, use it to summon squash spirits. For now, it sits like a quiet reminder that the land docenti belong to people it is, more like a long-term partnership, one in which you'll always be the intern. You drift toward a cluster of chinampas that look different. From a distance, they appear almost too neat. The rows are razor-straight, the trees pruned into clean lines. There are even small thatched structures at the ends of some altars, or maybe just a shady spot to hide from the midday sun with a cup of spiced cacao. Even the canal walls are reinforced with stone and timber, not just mud and roots. You walk slowly, taking it in. Someone has clearly invested time and wealth into this patch of floating paradise. These are not subsistence farms. These are elite gardens. These flowers will be dried, bundled, and brought into temples, or sent to the market as high-status offerings. They're beautiful, yes, but they're also political currency. Suspicious. He offers you a welcome that sounds rehearsed, and gestures toward the plot. "Noble family garden," he says. A boy practices by the water's edge, while a woman in layered skirts harvests tiny chilies into a decorated basket. You nod politely as you pass, unsure whether you're witnessing agriculture or performance art. For show, for ceremony, for gifts. You pull alongside and hop onto one of them. The ground here is firmer, more structured. A young man approaches, wearing a simple tunic that is somehow crisp and spotless. Each one has space, air, a kind of respect. It's farming with a velvet glove. Some are labeled with symbols, others simply arranged in patterns. Incense burns slowly, and beside it sits a shallow bowl of maize flour. These elite chinampas aren't separate from the system. They're the display windows, the gift boxes, the performance stage for a society that saw agriculture as sacred theater. You've seen this before offerings to the maize goddess. You don't see waste. You don't see arrogance. Just care, expressed in flowers instead of yams. He notices you watching and gives a small shrug, like, why not make it beautiful? The bowl is surrounded by tiny footprints pressed into the soil, not from a child, from a raccoon, probably. Either way, the gods seem amused. Behind the ceremony and polish, you recognize something familiar. Intentional, probably. You run your fingers through the soft leaves, releasing a scent of anise and mint. Insects hum around you. The water licks at the shore. A man with a lined face, an elaborate neckpiece, explains this is a seed library, carefully maintained for specific traits. These seeds come from pure lines, passed down through families like heirlooms. A nobleman's way of reminding the god's end, his rivals that he, too, could coax abundance from mud. Were the noble gardens truly maintained by their owners, or by skilled laborers working under patronage? If your chinampa grew the reddest amaranth or the most fragrant sage, you were more than just rich, you were cultured. Most agree it was a bit of both. Prestige and practicality, mingled with ritual and a bit of social flexing, but someone's clearly pampering them, providing shade, heat, maybe even imported soil. The muck is the same. The water from the same canals. These pristine plots float just like the rougher ones do. You're not sure if that last one is poetic or practical. The pods dangle like golden ornaments, guarded by carefully placed stakes and watchful gardeners. Ah, you're in chinampa, prime real estate now. Historians still debate the precise relationship between elite Aztecs and chinampa farmers. Here, the crops aren't just food, they're symbols. You pass a stand of cacao trees, which technically shouldn't be growing this far north or at this altitude. Nearby, rows of flor de mayo and flowers bloom in carefully tiered layers, planted not for pollination or cooking, but for ceremony. You hear music, a soft flute, a hollow drum. This isn't just a farm, it's an extension of power, and yet it works. You step into one of the shade structures and find shelves lined with clay pots, each holding a different seed. There is a fringe theory that Aztec elites used gardens like these as biological banks, preserving not just genetics but prestige. You crouch beside a row of herbs and notice something else. None of the plants here are overcrowded. Still, make no mistake, the same chinampa principles apply here. Equality, layered in mud. You ask one of the gardeners if the noble families ever visit. He shrugs. 4 festivals, 4 weddings, 4 death. You wander toward the edge of the garden where a small altar rests, tucked under a canopy of gourds. As the sun continues to slide lower, the golden light now reflecting off the polished surfaces of gourds and carved stones, you begin to see the logic. You catch sight of a gardener painting a design onto a squashtini geometric patterns using natural dyes. And why not? Even in opulence, the land is treated with reverence. You sit for a moment beside a plot of herbs shaped like the symbol for wind. It's all too easy to forget that this wasn't just farming, it was diplomacy, religion, aesthetic expression. The flute plays again. A heron glides overhead, wings outstretched. You return to your canoe, the pole resting beside you, and cast one last glance at the elite gardens. The same roots, the same soil, the same partnership between land and hand. Even the prettiest squash came from the same lake bottom as the rest. The day has mellowed into a soft orange haze. The sun hangs low, wobbling like a tired yoke above the rim of the hills. Your canoe drifts again, this time toward the outskirts, where the chinampas grow sparser, and the sounds of work give way to something quieter. Here, on the edge of the floating world, you find another kind of plot, still a chinampa. Yes, but it's different. Smaller, less active. No maize towers or bustling farmers. A woman in her 50s emerges from a shade shelter and nods at you. She's grinding something in a stone molkajit with an easy, circular rhythm. Her hair is wrapped in a colorful cloth, and her hands are stained green at the fingertips. Instead, it's full of medicinal plants, low-growing, fragrant, complicated. What's clear is that the Aztecs had a deep and much of it grew right here, in the soft, wet, forgiving earth of floating plots. Tzampantli, root, she murmurs, for fever dreams, night worries. You'll raise a brow. Anxiety remedy. She nods, amused. Unlike the food chinampas, this one isn't heavily dredged or layered. The soil is thinner, lighter, more absorbent. These plants don't want the richness of maize, too much nutrition, and they want subtlety. Balance also works on goats. This is not a field of food. It's a pharmacy, that if you ignore their ritual snow songs, no offerings, they'll grow weaker. Not from drought or pests, but from disappointment. You step ashore, careful not to trample anything important, which in this case is everything. It smells like cinnamon and cut grass, with a faint sting of something floral. You sip it and feel your shoulders drop half an inch. Whatever it is, it's working. Symbols of respect. Some plants are considered sacred, others moody. Maize feeds the stomach, but this, she gestures to the garden, feeds the rest. Around you, the plants sway gently in the breeze. You'll need it after this place. As you push off, she returns to her malkajit, still grinding, still humming, the herbal world revolving around her in slow, sacred circles. You help her cover a few plants with thin cloths protection from the coming dew, she explains. They dreamed, you know. A few insects buzz lazily overhead. You hear birds call across the canal, and somewhere a wooden paddle creaks. This is a Tlachi squee, a caretaker of healing plants. You've wandered into a space for health. She gestures for you to sit, then goes back to work. You take in you don't understand it, but it seeps into your spine. It's not a performance, it's medicine. Here, rows are looser, not straight lines, but gentle curves, plantings shaped like rivers or crescents, each variety with its own small mound. You recognize some aloe, sage, marigold. Others are a mystery, tall grasses with purple fronds. She crushes it between her palms, then rubs the pulp into a scrap of cotton cloth. You feel like you've just sniffed something your ancestors would recognize. Warm broth when you were sick, a hand on the forehead, a blanket tucked just so, maybe not so different, after all. For stomach fire, she says, before offering you the cloth to smell. Dainty blossoms hiding under low leaves. Something that smells faintly like mint and burnt rubber. Historians still argue how widely medicinal chinampas were used. Were they personal gardens for herbalists or community resources for larger regions? The click squee holds up a root and breaks it with a quiet snap. You lean in. It's earthy, sharp, and strangely comforting. She moves along a row and kneels by a patch of low blue-green plants. You help her water the plants with a gourd dipper. You notice tiny signs near each patch, stones arranged in a circle, or feathers tucked into a reed. These are markers, yes, but also protection. There is a fringe belief among some modern-day Nahua herbalists that these plants remember bad harvests. You're skeptical, but also surrounded by thriving herbs, so maybe skepticism can wait. The Klechik squee pours you a small cup of warm tea from a black clay pot. She smiles. People forget, she says softly. You lie back on a reed mat she lays out for you. She begins to hum a soft, low song without words. You remember the things your own family once did. The sun dips lower. Shadows stretch like soft ink across the chinampa. Before you leave, she hands you a bundle of dried herbs wrapped in agave twine. Sleep tea, she says. You thank her quietly and climb back into your canoe. As the chinampa fades behind you, the scent of the herbs lingers on your hands. It's not just the maize that keeps this world afloat. It's this too carefully remembered cures, whispered knowledge, and the quiet gardens that heal what the corn can't. Your canoe glides through dusky water now. As evening begins its quiet descent, the sky is lavender and gold, the color of ripe plums and worn copper. Just squash, maize, beans, and the soft cluck of chickens in the reeds. The heart of the floating world lives here, not in palaces or temples, but in the sweat and rhythm of ordinary people growing extraordinary gardens. Just the raw intimacy of food, family, and dirt. Each paddle stroke is slower, more reflective. You're heading not toward the center, nor the edge, but towards something in between. The chinampas of daily life. These are the plots where nothing is fancy. No elite arrangements, no ceremonial herbs. She washes them in a bowl, then tosses them into the pot. Nothing is measured. Everything is instinct. You step onto a well-worn chinampa, lined with uneven rows of maize and a few scrappy tomato plants. Each tool shows wear from decades of use, and none of them have changed in hundreds of years. A dog wags its tail at you, unimpressed. Nearby, two children chase each other between rows, brandishing bean pods like tiny swords. Tools, routines, planting schedules. They didn't change much because they worked. Why fix a maize stalk support when it has held your crop steady since your great-great-great-grandmother's time? The grandmother tells you how many maize cycles she's seen. A delicacy, they insist. Crunchy, nutty, surprisingly pleasant. Chickens tuck themselves under reeds. The dog curls beside a beanstalk. The air is thick with wood smoke, crushed leaves, and the smell of stewed chili. How the rains used to come heavier. How the lake feels, quieter now. You ask if that's good or bad. You help the children gather dried leaves for tomorrow's fire. And in between, they laugh, cook, argue about which squash variety tastes better, and occasionally step barefoot into something regrettable near the chicken hut. The grandmother passes you a folded cloth containing warm tamales, pressed flat with chilies and herbs, a farewell gift, or maybe a welcome one. The children giggle one last time. The dog barks just once. You even try your hand at turning the compost pile though. You quickly regret lifting it from the wrong side, which unleashes a swarm of what may or may not be demon mosquitoes. Not its grandeur, not its rituals, just the everyday poetry of surviving and sharing. The lake accepts your canoe once more. The stars begin to hum. Their mother, bent over a basket of chilies, gives you a tired wave and a small smile that says, "Yes, this is what it looks like." One tosses a pod, another tries to knock it with a rock. You ask if it has a name. The grandfather shrugs. A game, no need for elaborate titles. It passes the time. This is a working plot, lived in, scuffed around the edges, no frills. It's not the kind of thing that makes it into textbooks or tourist pamphlets, but it's real. You sit near a cooking fire where something stews in a clay pot, fragrant and smoky. A man, likely the children's grandfather, gestures for you to sit and points to a gourd bowl. You accept it with both hands. Inside, a scoop of tlacotlauli, maize mush, mixed with beans and herbs. Was it mostly maize and beans, or were other things like insects, small fish, frogs just as common? Most likely, it depended on the season and on the family. But here, in this chinampa kitchen, there's no question what the main ingredients are. Basive, comforting, and exactly what you didn't know you needed. You spoon it slowly as the man talks not at you, but near you. He names the plants pointing one by one with a lazy stick. Saxetliotol, chilpachol. You repeat the names, stumbling over the sounds. He chuckles, then tries your language. Maize, bean, chili. He pauses, then adds everything else. Decoration. Historians still argue about the balance of food types in the Aztec diet. The grandmother appears, carrying a basket of qualites, wild greens picked fresh this morning. You notice a set of tools lined up near the fire. A curved planting stick, a basket woven from reeds, a wooden paddle carved with a handle shaped like a duck. There's a fringe theory among anthropologists that daily Aztec life, the grandeur of empire, was deeply conservative in practice. You watch the children now playing a game with bean pods and flat stones. The conversation meanders like the canal. She doesn't answer, just adds more greens to the stew. Evening deepens, and the chinampa softens with it. You're offered another bowl, this one with tiny fried insects sprinkled on top. You help wash dishes by the canal, the clay bowls scoured with sand and rinsed in lake water. They laugh. You swat. Everyone wins. This section of chinampa life may not be ceremonial or scholarly. The land feeds the people. The people feed the land. As the stars blinked into being, the family gathers by the fire. You climb into your canoe with the bundle, the family waving gently from the edge of the and as you push off into the night canal, you realize something. This muddy, spicy, humble moment is the true pulse of the chinampa world. The stars above are brighter now, scattering their cold light across the water like forgotten maize kernels. You paddle slowly, each stroke sending tiny ripples outward, disturbing the reflections just enough to remind you that this world floats not only in space but in spirit. It's not silence. Exactly, there's the rustle of water reeds, the chirp of frogs, the occasional hoot of an albot. It's a hush built into the landscape, a kind of natural whisper. As you move, you notice the hush. You drift up to one plot that's clearly not in active use. Still, there's a certain order. Withered stalks propped neatly, wildflowers blooming where rose once stood. A lone heron stands on one leg in the shallows, completely ignoring you. Some sag slightly into the water, half surrendered back to the lake. Trees grow at odd angles. Vines twist around tools long abandoned. You feel the heat from billow warmth, trapped in old compost layers, still doing their job years later. Even here, the soil remembers. Or did they simply retire, left to decay in dignity? Like old tools, no longer sharp but still respected. More like a whispering, that at night, when the wind moves right and the water's just still enough, you can hear the voices of those who worked here. You swear you hear the faint sound of digging though no one's there. Or maybe it's just your own heartbeat, sensing with the breath of the place. Not spooky, just present. Like the land isn't quite ready to forget, frayed, almost brittle, probably used once as a kneeling pad. You brush off the dirt, fold it gently, and tuck it into a notch in the tree's trunk. You hold it for a moment, feel the grooves where fingers once rested, thumb marks worn smooth by repetition. You don't take it, you just set it upright again, as if to say, ah, it feels ... appropriate. Not a burial, more like a memory placed back where it belongs. You're heading toward an older part of the chinampa system now, less cultivated, less crowded. The plots here seem ... sleepy, overgrown, the kind that seeps into your muscles and untangles thoughts you didn't know were knotted. This is where the retired chinampas lie, or sleep, or, if you prefer, dream. Some things just stay, but the water welcomes you, and the breeze gently tugs your bow forward. You cast one last glance back at the sleeping chinampa. It looks like it's been waiting, or maybe it forgot what it was waiting for, like the scent of marigold in the soil, or the way water traces the same path year after year, even when the rows are gone. The overgrowth glows pale blue. The water glistens. Even the heron seemed momentarily frozen in reverence. There's a strange peace here. Or does it simply wait, knowing that someday someone might come again, curious, gentle, a little lost, and fall in love with the shape of the land all over? You tie off the canoe and step onto the soft ground. It's almost ceremonial, standing guard over nothing, a marker of effort. Now weather-worn and covered in moss, historians still argue what became of decommissioned chinampas. Were they intentionally flooded and left to the lake? Were they recycled, dismantled, and rebuilt elsewhere? The prevailing theory is a little of each. You kneel near a cluster of overgrown herbs and notice a planting stake, half-rotted but still upright. You press your hand into the earth. It's soft, forgiving. There's a fringe belief, passed down quietly among chinamperos, that these retired plots are haunted, but not in a ghostly way. You sit for a while near the edge of the plot and listen. A breeze rustles through dry husks. Something croaks in the canal. You find a piece of woven reed, mat buried near a tree. There's no fire here, no cooking smells, no laughter but it doesn't feel empty, just quiet, purposefully quiet. You remember something the old gardener said, or rather didn't say, that not everything in a chinampa needs to be planted. You wander a bit farther and stumble upon a forgotten Tula digging stick, split down the middle, left propped against a half-fallen fence of woven reeds. You pick it up. It's heavier than it looks. The moon crests above the hills, casting a silver light that washes the chinampa in soft shimmer. You sit again, this time on a fallen log, and look out across the canal. What happens to a garden when no one tends it? Does it become wilderness? Does it forget what it was? You feel drowsy now, not from fatigue, but from the weight of stillness. This is not a forgotten place. It's a remembering place. You return to your canoe slowly, reluctant to leave the hush behind. No words, no need, just the softest ripple as your paddle dips once more into the lake. The moon is high now, and the canals reflect it with perfect clarity, so the chinampas become drifting clouds, and you, just a shadow gliding between them. You're returning, slowly, to the heart of the system. Not because you must, but because something there calls to you. By day, this was just another garden, but now, under moonlight, it comes alive. Fires crackle in stone braziers. Reed mats have been rolled out. Lanterns, simple bowls of oil with flickering wicks, bob gently, hung from ahot branches. People move quietly, purposefully, laying out goods, not in stalls, but in open circles. Some argue they were rituals themselves, offerings traded under moonlight, symbolic more than economic. Others suggest it was pure practicality. After a day in the fields, when the sun finally relented, why not do your business under the stars? Next to him, a woman ladles steaming broth from a clay pot into gourd bowls of toll laced with wild honey. You buy one, of course, not because you need it, but because it seems rude not to. A boy no older than 10 holds up a painted rock and offers you his best sales pitch. Each item exchanged with a nod, a word of thanks, a mutual understanding that this economy is built on more than value, it is built on connection. Gardeners trade jokes. Grandmothers pass along stew recipes. No contracts, no scales, just trust. Places where news passed quietly, where alliances were whispered, where warnings and favors traveled as easily as tamales and thread. It's not a special rock, objectively, but you buy it anyway. His smile alone is worth at least 2 cacao beans. A sound, maybe, A rhythm. You follow it. They clink softly. An accidental lullaby. The man explains that they're meant to scare away crows but invite. How that works, no one's sure. Herons are picky, he says, then winks, slowly, gently. Mats rolled up, baskets lifted, fire embers stamped out with care. No announcements, just a communal sense that the moment is complete. It leads you to a market chinampa, one of the few spaces built, not to grow, but to gather. You hadn't seen it before because, like most things here, it changes with the hour. This is nocturnal trade, the hush market. You feel no rush, no urgency, just the ease of a people who know how to live in rhythm with something much older than clocks. Inside, a cluster of squash seeds, wrapped in dried maize husk, tied with reed string. A gift, an accident. It's less formal than the grand markets of no loud cries of vendors, no pounding of drums, just soft chatter, the gentle thud of baskets being lowered, the rattle of cacao beans, the Aztec version of coins being counted under someone's breath. Historians still debate whether these twilight exchanges were widespread or merely seasonal. You dock quietly and step onto the chinampa. It feels like stepping into someone else's dream. A young man sells squash, blossoms wrapped in maize leaves, arranged like fans, or planted, or simply held onto, until its purpose becomes clear. It tastes like toasted corn and starlight. You wander from mat to mat. There are dried chilies bundled with maguey string, woven bracelets made of dyed reeds, feathers sewn into little charms shaped like frogs. This is not a market in the way we usually think of one. No haggling, no loud calls, just a gentle pulse of trade. You see farmers exchanging seed packets amaranth for squash, beans for maize, along with a few spoken tips about water levels and pest beetles. There is a fringe idea among some archaeologists that these hush markets were as much about information as they were about goods. You believe it. You sit beside an older couple selling wind chimes made of bone and shell. You buy one, or maybe it buys you. As the night deepens, the market begins to dissolve. You return to your canoe with your wind chime, your stone, and your belly full of honeyed maize. You drift back toward the center canal, where the market chinampa fades into shadow, and then something catches your eye. A small bundle left behind. You paddle closer, curious. You look around. No one nearby, no name on it. You take it with quiet reverence. Perhaps, like everything in this floating world, it's meant to be passed along. You place the bundle beside you and continue down the canal. The wind picks up gently, rustling through the reeds. The chinampas breathe on. The canoe rocks gently under your weight as you glide deeper into the night. The hush market long behind you now, tucked back into the soft folds of the floating world. It's quieter here, though not silent. Nothing in the chinampa system is ever truly silent. You follow to what appears to be a ceremonial one used not for crops, not for trade, not even for medicine or family dinners, but for something stranger, older. Even now, the water murmurs, the wind hums through trees like a breath drawn in and never quite released. Ahead, a firelight flickers low and steady, like a heartbeat. You step lightly from your canoe. The chinampa is wide, open, its perimeter marked with standing stones and worn paths of crushed shell. The sound comes from a man in a feathered cloak who steps into the circle. He walks slowly, almost lazily, but each movement seems tuned to the rhythm of the space around him. Others believe they were informal spaces held by families or communities for solstice prayers, planting blessings, or even grief rituals. No one claps, no one cheers. The ritual isn't for spectacle, it's for balance. But all agree, the chinampa was not just soil, it was sacred space. That before you created one, you had to dream it. You had to walk its space in your mind, offer something of yourself, and only then begin to layer mud and roots. Her breath carries the sound into the trees, where it drifts among the branches like pollen. He carries a staff tipped with obsidian, and on his belt hangs a pouch full of bone and shell charms. The group chuckles. Even the fire seems amused. You take them out, cradling them in your palm. Should you, would it be intrusive? There's no shrine, no towering structure, just earth, water, and open sky. At the center, a circle of people sit in silence around the fire. They don't look up. They don't have to. You sit too. No one speaks. His Nahuatl phrases rise and fall like waves. And though you don't understand the words, you understand the intention. Gratitude, petition, memory. The ritual is simple, Give back what was taken. Not repayment, not guilt, just acknowledgement. And then, a rattle. You kneel beside it, press your hand into the soil, and plant the bundle gently. You whisper not a prayer, exactly, just a hope. The current is slower now, deliberate, like it had just witnessed something it can't quite explain. A final act, a handful of colored maize is scattered into the canal, where it floats like little moons. The fire is allowed to dim, not extinguished but allowed. Not aggressive, not sharp, just a quiet HSH, like seeds whispering to each other. This is a ritual. Historians still argue about the precise role these plots played. Some claim they were extensions of temples, a way to sanctify the landscape beyond the city. The man begins to speak not loudly, not in sermon, more like a lullaby spoken into the earth. He pours water from a gourd into a small carved channel in the soil. It trickles toward a planted squash vine. One by one, others rise. They offer small things, dried herbs, feathers, the first scoop of cooked maize, a shard of obsidian wrapped in red. You feel it, too. There is a fringe idea among certain ethno-historians that chinampas weren't just built, they were invited. You wonder if this is that invitation, or the response to one. A woman offers a lullaby into the fire, soft, and her voice cracks, but no one minds. Another man offers laughter, gust one story, silly and short, about the time he fell into a compost trench chasing a pig. The squash seeds are still there, warm from your body heat. You feel your pocket, but something in the air shifts, encouraging. You rise, and in silence, walk to the vine. The speaker watered earlier. No one claps, no one praises, but the person beside you places a hand on your shoulder, brief and light, acknowledged. The ritual continues. There's a kind of genius in that, knowing when to let something rest without forcing an ending. You return to your canoe and push off. As you drift away, the chinampa fades behind reeds and mist, but the feeling stays. You've seen chinampas of plenty, chinampas of pride, chinampas of healing, even chinampas of decay. Now you've seen a chinampa of spirit, and it might be the most fertile kind of all. The night is full now, longer becoming, no longer arriving, but simply being. The lake lies like a sheet of ink, still and endless, broken only by the gentle wake of your canoe as you drift through the final channels. The stars above mirror the lanterns once hanging between chinampa trees, and your mind drifts just as easily as your boat. Your arms move from memory now. No urgency, no destination, just motion for the sake of motion. But as you draw closer, the shape becomes clearer, just a few steps wide, nestled between two larger ones, like a forgotten punctuation mark in the middle of a sentence. Ahead, a final plot. You almost pass it by. It's so small, so modest. You think it might be a trick of the moonlight. You tie your canoe and step onto the soft earth, and a faded mat where someone once sat, maybe long ago, maybe yesterday. The silence is deeper here, almost like breath held in. There's nothing grand here. No maze, no ceremonial stones, just a few stalks of beans, some scattered flowers. You sit on the mat, and now, you wait. No one comes, and yet, you feel less alone than you have all night. The stars blink lazily above you, and a few reeds sway in the wind, brushing each other with a sound like pages turning. It isn't a market, it isn't a memory, it isn't even a place you're meant to find. This chinampa isn't for growing, or healing, or feasting. But it's here, not float, like islands, but actually choose where they wish to rest. That if they were truly disrespected, truly neglected, they would drift away in the night, taking their secrets with them. And here is enough, that each island, each canal, each muddy breath of earth was part of a great living thing, a floating body, always shifting, always remembering. You lie back, folding your arms beneath your head, and look up through a screen of ashwort branches. Some say the Aztecs believed the lake had a soul, feels very much awake. Somewhere, far off, a single flute plays, not a melody, just a tone, like a lullaby without words. You believe it now. Historians still argue what the fall of this world meant. When the Spanish arrived, when the lake was drained, when the canals were paved and swallowed by city blocks. Some say the chinampas died, others say they slept. But here, on this small floating patch of nothing in particular, you feel them breathing. There's a fringe theory not widely accepted that chinampas could move. It's probably just a story. And yet, shared meals and laughter with strangers, dipped your hands into ancient mud, and listened to songs older than empires. You close your eyes and listen. The water laps quietly at the edge of the mat. You're not sure how long you stay there. An hour, a dream's length. The seeds planted by hand, whether real or in your imagination, are settling in their beds of warm lake silt, ready to dream. But when you open your eyes again, the moon has shifted. Your canoe bobs nearby, patient. Your legs have fallen asleep. You rise, brush soil from your palms, and look back at the tiny plot one last time. The trees will keep watch. The waters will hum their lullaby. You don't leave anything. And yet, you know something of you will remain here. Let your thoughts, once busy and bristling, drift like petals on water. And then you paddle, one last time, back into the canal. No urgency, no need. The chinampa has already accepted you. And now, with the night fully draped around your shoulders like a soft blanket, let your breath slow, just a little. You've wandered through floating fields and silent rituals. Each ripple of water beneath your canoe is still gently echoing the steps you took. The reeds still sway from your passage, no matter where you are now, beneath heavy quilts in a quiet bedroom, on a night train humming through distant hills, or in some quiet corner of your thoughts. You carry the stillness of that ancient, engineered, enchanted place. Let your body soften now, like the soil of the chinampa after rain. The stars above, mirrored on the lake, will hold your worries for a while. And in the distance, just faintly, a single flute still plays. So rest easy. Now, you've traveled far without needing to leave your pillow. May your dreams be rooted deep and bloom wide. And may you, like the floating gardens of the Mexica, always find a way to stay afloat. No.